What's going on, everyone? So a lot of people I've seen mention the idea of like, hey, Frank Vogel returning. There's even kind of been articles about like, hey, what about Frank Vogel back to the Lakers and stuff? As a head coach, no, personally. It's just me. Of course, I want to hear your thoughts and opinions, so let me know down in the comments. Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. But here's the thing. There's a reason the Lakers fired Frank Vogel. And I was fine with the firing. Talked about it back when it happened. And it's a lot of the same reasons why the Phoenix Suns just fired Frank Vogel, right? Frank Vogel's a very specific type of coach. I don't think he's a bad coach. I don't think he's this like great top coach in the league type thing. But I do think if he has the right team, the right personnel, and the right coaching staff, he can succeed, right? We saw it with the Lakers in 2020. And we'll touch on that here more in a minute. But like if Frank Vogel was the head coach of like, say, Minnesota, I think he'd be killing it. I think people would be like, man, he might be the best coach. Like, you get that hype because the team has success. But that team is like perfectly built for a guy like Frank Vogel. Right? Frank Vogel never made sense going to Phoenix. We talked about it when it happened. I was like, that roster doesn't really fit the type of coaching that Frank Vogel does. And that's the problem, period, with a lot of these head coaches. It's why I'm not against bringing on a JJ Redick, or not against bringing on an assistant that doesn't have, all this head coaching experience. You're talking about head coaches that are all out of a job for a reason. And a lot of them have been out for like years now. And two, it's like a lot of them are kind of set in their ways and are a very specific type of head coach that need a very specific type of thing. And if it doesn't fit, then it makes things difficult, right? Where I think a guy like a JJ Redick, or a guy like a Micah from Minnesota, or Edelman from Denver, or like one of these guys, right? Kenny Atkinson, right? These guys, I think, could come in, and they're not really set in their ways. Yes, they come from these great coaching trees, which is another big thing that I keep hitting on, that I keep highlighting, right? Guy like Charles Lee, he got signed by the Charlotte Hornets. Did a whole video on Charles Lee, and what was the big thing I said in that video, right? You didn't see it, go check it out after this video. But one of the big things that I talked about was the coaching tree he comes from. Joe Mazzulla, talk about Mike Budenholzer, right? Like two guys that are just like, little questions, right? Especially like Mazzulla, he might be the only coach that's just as bad as Darvin Ham at times, right? But you look at a guy like a Kenny Atkinson, you look at a guy like, like I said, Micah, like you look at a guy like Edelman, like these guys, they are guys that come from good trees, the Mike Malones, the Chris Finch, Steve Kerrs, right? Like they're all kind of in this like brain trust. And you got a bunch of these like great-minded people. Even a guy like JJ Redick, right? He has the basketball mind. He has the know-how. The question is can he kind of manage on a head coaching level, right? Because there's a lot that goes into head coaching besides just like, hey, out here we practice and I draw up plays, right? There's a lot that goes into it. But a lot of these assistants and even guys like a JJ Redick in particular, they're not set in their ways, right? They're wet behind there. Like they can mold, they can shape, they can kind of get away from, like what some of these head coaches are in particular. So I was thinking and kind of, like trying to piece together a head coach, like an actual like coaching roster, right? For like what I'd like to see on the Lakers bench. Go back to the 2020 roster, right? That was like the Avengers of coaching. I mean, you're talking, like I said, you had Frank Vogel, you had Jason Kidd, you had Lionel Hollins, you had Phil Handy, you had these like top guys all coming together. Like the coaching staff was as good as the Lakers roster was, right? And you had this nice balance, and you had guys like Frank Vogel. One of the biggest reasons he got fired by Phoenix and the Lakers is because he's non-confrontational, right? He's afraid to kind of get in players and whatnot, right? Like it's why there was a lot of talks about Phoenix, right? He's not holding players accountable. He's not in guys' behinds about certain things. He's kind of passive and just kind of, right? But he had Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd was that guy. Jason Kidd was the guy that would come in, and call LeBron out, call Anthony Davis out, wasn't afraid of them, right? Like you need a guy like that. You need a guy that these guys respect that can come in. That's why I don't think Frank Vogel as a head coach for the Lakers and returning to the Lakers, I don't think makes a lot of sense because I think it's just going to be more of the same. Right? Again, I like Frank Vogel. I just don't think he's the guy for this Lakers team. But I do think he brings a lot of value. One thing though is, would Frank Vogel want to return after how the falling out happened, right? Like, is that something that he'd be willing to do? To me, I think what you do is, if he's open to a return, not as a head coach, but bring him in as an assistant, and his primary job is to defense and manage the bigs and stuff. I think that's the thing that he's best at, kind of drawing up sets for bigs and kind of running and playing through bigs. And then also on the defense side of the ball, he's an excellent defensive schemist and strategist, and he could be really good on the defensive side. Again, start piecing together this avengers type roster for the bench, right? I like the idea of a JJ Redick, right? Now, whether you want to make him the head coach because he's LeBron's guy or whatever, or the offensive assistant, I wouldn't hate if they did. So let's say they did bring in a JJ Redick, right? I don't hate the idea, but I think no matter what, you have to bring in a guy that has experience, right? Frank Vogel could be that. Frank Vogel could be the guy. So you have JJ Redick as like the face and the talking head, but you have Frank Vogel, who he doesn't have to deal with all like the noise that comes with being the head coach. JJ Redick has to deal with that. JJ Redick handles the offense. Frank Vogel handles the defense. Bring back Phil Handy as like the player coach, player development guy. So now you got that. So now you have JJ Redick as like the Jason Kidd. You have Frank Vogel as Frank Vogel, who's doing the defensive side of things. Jason Kidd was also kind of the offensive strategist. You have the same thing with that. And then bring in maybe like a Terry Stotts or something like that can come in and he kind of be the balance for those two. Right, you get a guy that kind of come in, and again, another head coaching experience. Same thing as you saw in 2020 with Lionel Hollins, a guy that had experience as a head coach. Jason Kidd had experience as a head coach, right? Frank Vogel, obviously, had experience as a head coach. You kind of round out this roster the same way as far as, again, the bench goes, the coaching staff, and you kind of put together this like nice balance and influx. So instead of, Frank Vogel, Jason Kidd, Lionel Hollins, and Phil Handy, now you have, say, a JJ Redick, a Frank Vogel, a Terry Stotts, and a Phil Handy, right? And then, of course, you got to round out kind of the, plays and stuff like that, but our videographer, coach, and all that stuff, right? So, to me, I'd like to see the Lakers kind of try to piece together, because that was supposed to be the idea with Darvin Ham, and then they decided to not go that route and kind of let Darvin Ham pick whoever he wanted. I also think that was part of the beginning of the end, where if you do hire, even if it's not, just because I know a lot of people don't really want Jason Kidd, right? Even a Kenny Atkinson, or if you go bring in a Micah, right, or you bring in an Adelman or whomever, right? Bring in one of these guys from Minnesota or Denver, or Atkinson is with the Warriors, right? So you bring one of those guys in. Still, they're not guys that have head coaching experience, right? So again, I think you need to bring them and have some kind of like stability on that bench, and not go through the same trap that you had with Frank Vogel or with Darvin Ham, right? So again, let's remove JJ Redick, or maybe you still bring in JJ Redick, but as an assistant, right? Maybe you do promote a Kenny Atkinson. You have like a Kenny Atkinson, a JJ Redick, a Frank Vogel, maybe instead of Terry Stotts, right? And then Phil Handy. Maybe you even bring in Stotts, right? Like, and my point is, like, I want to see just a quality bench front to back, because that's what also was a big part of the success in 2020. Now, obviously, the players still have to play. Obviously, the players are important. Obviously, that 2020 roster was ridiculous. They were the best team in the league all season. But that coaching staff was excellent and a big part of it, right? You had a big brain trust of all these various coaches that had experience, that had different looks and different aspects, that handled different things. One guy's the offense, one guy's the development guy, one guy is the balance that's kind of like the, the swing vote. And then you had the defensive guy, right? So Frank Vogel's the defensive guy, Jason Kidd's the offensive guy, Lionel Hollins is that in between and the swing vote guy, and then Phil Handy as the development guy. I want to see that. I really think that would be kind of the best approach for the Lakers, right? As we round up this coaching staff. We'll see, because look, Phoenix is going to be trying to do the same thing. So we need to kind of get a little pep in our step a little bit here. So we'll see. We'll see how this all plays out. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like that idea? Like, yes. See if maybe you can bring in a Frank Vogel as like an assistant. Again, he has to, 1, be willing to come back to Lakers, 2, be willing to be an assistant, and 3, I still don't know if that's like the best course of action. But again, as an assistant, he doesn't really need the demand from the players as much as like, whoever the head coach is. Right? That's where it becomes more important. But again, how do you feel? Whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.